They called him Baron Wilhelm Drexler, but in the candlelit corridors of his Corinthian estate, people whispered another name, the Baron of Unfinished Children. No court ever proved anything, and no historian dared preserve his truth, yet fragments of his journals survive, scattered across private archives like burnt edges of a confession. The story begins in the winter of 1798, when rumors spread that the Baron had paid 9 men, each carefully chosen, each sworn to secrecy, to participate in an experiment he claimed would change the nature of inheritance forever. What he truly wanted was not science, nor progress, nor fame. What he wanted was a child formed by design, sculpted not by chance but by a chosen combination of bloodlines. And so he devised a method cold, calculated, and unbearably cruel to determine whose lineage would secure the Drexler fortune after his own failed marriage left him childless. But the 9 men did not know the full truth. They did not know that the Baron believed one of them carried a blood impurity that had haunted his lands for 2 centuries. They did not know that the Baron lacked any intention of sharing the outcome with them. And they certainly did not know that the pregnancy he orchestrated, one pregnancy with one woman, would become the currency of a gamble none of them could walk away from. This is the lost account of the last aristocrat who tried to edit bloodlines by hand, and the 9 men who slowly realized they had traded their lives for an unborn child. The Baron's chosen vessel was Elara Vos, a 21-year-old village midwife known for her quiet intelligence and for surviving a childhood plague that spared almost no one else. The Baron claimed this made her exceptionally resilient, but his journals reveal a colder reason. Her lineage carried no political alliances, no wealth, no influence, making her perfect for a controlled experiment. To the 9 men, the Baron presented his project as a scientific competition. Each man would contribute material, carefully documented and tested, as the Baron attempted to determine which lineage produced the strongest early signs of life. He promised payment beyond imagination, land grants, even positions in his estate, yet he never revealed that he had already selected Elara as the mother long before they agreed. The men believed they were joining an elite study. In truth, they were stepping into a labyrinth of manipulation where every variable was controlled by the Baroness' obsessions. Only weeks after the procedure, Elara felt the first tremors of pregnancy, but something was strange. Her symptoms came too early, too intense, as if her body was resisting something unnatural. Meanwhile, the Baron kept the 9 men at the estate, forbidding them to leave, insisting he needed continuous observations. As days passed, their rooms were locked from the outside. They began whispering to each other at night, realizing that the Baron had no intention of letting them return home. The experiment, it seemed, did not end with conception. It was only beginning. By the end of the first month, tension inside the estate grew sharp enough to cut the cold Corinthian air. The Baron monitored Elara obsessively, documenting every breath, every shift in appetite, every pulse of her heartbeat. But what disturbed him most were the irregularities he could not explain: her body temperature rising unpredictably, the faint discoloration spreading across her abdomen, the way she claimed to hear echoes inside herself as if the child carried a sound she couldn't name. While Elara trembled under the weight of these symptoms, the 9 men were subjected to their own examinations. The Baron kept them isolated, feeding them conflicting information about the pregnancy. To one man, he claimed the child showed signs of unusual vitality. To another, he insisted the fetus was failing. To a third, he whispered that the child already favored his lineage. He played them against each other, stoking jealousy, fear, and suspicion until they barely trusted their own memories. Eventually, they discovered that the Baron had burned their letters home, destroyed their belongings, and dismissed their servants months earlier. The estate was now a sealed world. No one entered, no one left, and yet strange things began happening in the hallways at night, doors that opened on their own, candle flames that flickered without wind, the distant sound of a woman crying in a room no one lived in. The men began to suspect that the Baron's experiment was not about science. It was about control over them, over Elara, and over the unborn child whose fate was now intertwined with all 10 of theirs. The second month brought a transformation none of them could deny. Elara's body changed far faster than any pregnancy should. Her stomach hardened unnaturally. Her veins darkened. Her senses heightened to an almost painful degree. She claimed she could smell the men through the walls, distinguish their footsteps, and even sense when one of them was lying. The Baron saw these traits not as warnings but as triumphs. He believed he had succeeded in blending selective lineage into heightened human potential. The journals show his growing mania, pages filled with diagrams, sketches, genetic theories centuries ahead of their time but grounded in superstition rather than science. Meanwhile, the 9 men began suffering identical nightmares, visions of a child with no face, standing at the foot of their beds. At first they dismissed it as stress, but soon they learned every man had seen the same dream on the same night with the same gesture, the faceless child reaching toward them as if choosing one of them, or rejecting them all. When one man confronted the Baron, he vanished by morning. The Baron announced he had gone home, but his boots remained beside his bed. Another man swore he heard the missing man's voice echoing from the cellar calling for help, but when they forced the cellar door open they found only racks of medical tools and a single crib, carved with the Baron's crest. It was becoming clear. The experiment demanded obedience, and disobedience demanded removal. By the 3rd month, the estate had become a psychological battlefield. The remaining 8 men clung to each other in fragile alliances, afraid to sleep, afraid to wander too far from groups. The Baron intensified their examinations, blood draws twice daily, joint measurements, reaction tests to pain, sound, and temperature. But the strangest experiment involved sound. The Baron played tones through the walls at night, frequencies so low they shook the wooden beams. He claimed the fetus responded to vibration, and that the men's proximity altered the patterns. Elara suffered worst of all. She struggled to walk, her senses overwhelmed, her dreams filled with what she described as voices that don't belong to this world. Yet what terrified her most was the sense that the child inside her was choosing, rejecting 8 lineages, favoring one. She begged the Baron to end the experiment, but he refused. "This is bigger than you," he said, "bigger than all of us." Meanwhile, the men discovered the missing man's belongings locked inside the Baron's study. When one attempted to break in at night, the Baron caught him and announced another elimination, this time openly. In a chilling speech, he declared that only the strongest lineage deserves survival, reducing the men to competitors in a cruel game they never volunteered for. And as Elara's condition worsened, the men realized something horrific. The Baronese experiment could only end one of 2 ways: with a child born of forced lineage, or with the erasure of every man who contributed to it. The 4th month marked a breaking point. Elara's movements became erratic. She wandered the halls at night, sleepwalking, murmuring names of the 9 men as if reciting a roster she could not forget. She scratched strange symbols into the walls, spirals, twins, branching lines, as though mapping out the bloodlines in her dreams. The Baron interpreted everything as evidence of genetic synergism, claiming the child was sorting through inherited traits more rapidly than expected. But the men saw something different. Elara was deteriorating before their eyes, consumed by a pregnancy that no longer resembled anything human. In desperation, 2 men attempted escape, scaling the estate walls at night. They never made it beyond the gate. The Baron ordered their bodies buried under the orchard, claiming they had failed the experiment. Now only 6 remained. And yet, tensions tightened further when Elara began naming one man repeatedly: Anton Rice, a quiet, intelligent cartographer who had originally joined the experiment for the money. She said the child moved differently when he entered the room, and that his presence calmed her symptoms. This discovery awakened the Baron's deepest paranoia. If the child favored Anton, then the bloodline of Drexler would be replaced by a cartographer's. The Baron began testing Anton more intensely than the others, pushing him to the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, the remaining men debated whether Anton should run or stay, whether helping him survive meant dooming themselves. And all the while the Baron's writings grew darker, describing the unborn child as the future sovereign of a perfected bloodline, as if he were preparing to anoint the unborn infant with a crown forged from the bones of its fathers. As month 5 unfolded, the estate felt less like a mansion and more like a decaying shrine built around a single womb. Thunderstorms ravaged the hills, and the Baron interpreted every crack of lightning as a sign that nature itself recognized the significance of his work. Elara, barely conscious most days, whispered that the child was listening. She said she could feel its thoughts brushing against hers, not words, but intentions, and the strongest intention was fear. The men, trapped between madness and dread, confronted Anton. They demanded to know if the Baron had told him something they didn't know. Anton admitted he had been summoned privately repeatedly. The Baron seemed obsessed with proving that Anton's lineage was superior, forcing him through grueling endurance tests and inspecting old records of his family. He even asked Anton if he would accept guardianship of the child should the Baron not survive the birth. This revelation fractured the remaining group. Some believed Anton should be protected. Others feared he was the Baron's chosen and resented him for it. Fights broke out. One man vanished the next morning, no explanation, no farewell, and the Baron simply stated, "He is no longer needed." 5 men remained. That night, Elara screamed for hours, claiming the child was trying to separate itself, pulling away from certain bloodlines, rejecting them violently. She begged the men to leave her alone, insisting their presence was hurting the child, but the Baron saw this as proof that the unborn infant was choosing one father, and eliminating the others from within her mind. By the 6th month, the estate was collapsing in spirit. The 5 remaining men were gaunt, sleepless, and desperate. The Baroness' journals reveal that he believed only 2 lineages remained viable, Antonis and another unnamed man, but he refused to disclose which. Instead, he forced the men into a final set of tests designed to provoke fear, rage, jealousy, and loyalty. He claimed emotional responses influenced genetic imprinting, a theory with no scientific basis but immense power over the terrified participants. Elara, meanwhile, drifted between reality and fever dreams. She spoke as though the child were already conscious, already aware of who each man was. She warned Anton to stay away, saying the child was reaching for him too strongly, as if imprinting on him might kill her in the process. The others, convinced that Anton was the chosen one, planned to confront the Baron, but before they could act, another man disappeared. His room was stripped clean, bedsheets missing, floor scrubbed. The Baron declared he proved inadequate, but the remaining 4 found a scrap of the missing man's shirt near the furnace. They realized the Baron was disposing of them like failed specimens. Now only 4 men stood between Anton and the completion of the experiment for men who understood that survival meant either siding with Anton or destroying him. And outside, Elara began to bleed, not red, but a strange blackish tint the Baron described as genetic shedding, a horrifying term that foreshadowed the final phase of the pregnancy. The 7th month erupted into chaos. Elara collapsed during a midnight storm, her heartbeat erratic, her skin fevered, horizon focused. She begged the Baron to end the experiment, screaming that the child was splintering inside her. The Baron refused, insisting the pregnancy had reached its most critical stage. The 4 remaining men, driven beyond reason, confronted him in the Great Hall, demanding to leave. What happened next is unclear. Accounts differ. Journals are fragmented, but all sources agree that the confrontation ended with another death. A man fell down the marble staircase during the struggle, his skull shattering on the stone. The Baron claimed it was an accident. The others insisted he pushed him. Now 3 remained. Elara's condition worsened dramatically. She claimed the child was absorbing her memories, stripping them from her like pages torn from a book. She no longer remembered her parents' faces, her birthplace, or even her own voice. She told Anton she was afraid that if the child chose him fully, she would cease to exist before the birth. Meanwhile, the Baron's madness reached its peak. He dressed the estate as if preparing for a coronation, ordering gold cloths, candles, and relics placed around Elara's room. He called the unborn infant the heir of perfected blood and declared that its birth would correct the failings of mankind. But the 3 men realized something devastating. The Baron did not intend for any of them to survive the birth. They were ingredients, not fathers, and ingredients were disposed of once the recipe was complete. The 8th month arrived like a final judgment. Elara went into early labor amid unending storms, the estate trembling under the weight of thunder. The remaining 3 men barricaded themselves in a room, agreeing that Anton should be protected at all costs, if only because the child seemed to favor him, and killing him might unleash something none of them could predict. But the Baron's guards broke the door down and dragged them to the birthing chamber. What followed is recounted only through scattered survivor testimony, voices trembling decades later, unable to fully describe what they saw. Elara screamed as if being torn apart from within. The Baron chanted incoherent fragments of scripture and pseudoscience, urging the child to choose its father. The lights flickered, candles dying in waves. 1 man tried to run and was stabbed by the Baron himself. Only Anton and 1 other remained. In the final moments, Elara reached for Anton, sobbing, begging him not to let the child claim her last memory. But when the infant crowned, the Baron lunged forward to claim it only for Anton, to tackle him. The 2 struggled, and in the confusion, the infant was born prematurely, too small, too silent. Elara died moments later. The Baron collapsed, cradling the stillborn child, whispering, "It was perfect. It chose." Anton fled the estate with the last surviving man, both traumatized beyond repair. The Drexler lineage ended that night, erased by the Baron's own madness. And in the centuries since, the story survived only in fragments, scattered journals, contradictory testimonies, and a single note found in Anton's handwriting. 9 men paid for a child that never lived, but the Baron paid the highest price, believing he could engineer perfection, and discovering only the horror of trying.